steel mill started in the
1869.
1800s, and that dictated the development of this region. Boxcars of people came from Mexico, from southern United States, Mississippi, Tennessee, the other areas. The steel industry, Illinois Steel, and the predecessors of Illinois Steel basically had to bring a workforce here, and they developed this rough, raggedy, open space. We're going to see one community called Bush, which was a bushy area, a Native American settlement area, actually. And because of the steel mill, Carnegie Steel, they were able to develop some of the homes there for the workers. And you'll see some of this community has homes in the 40-year range, wooden frames. They were not built for wealthy people. These were built for workers. And the area has seen its times. What I'm excited about, and I'm fifth generation South Chicagoan, so this is the only community I know as a living place, is that in 1998, when I started doing tours, basically for teachers of the local schools, I said that it's exciting times. I think I was a little premature in some of those enthusiasms, because up until now, we're just beginning to see the redevelopment start. The U.S. Steel, the former U.S. Steel property at 79th Street to 89th Street or 90th Street is vacant and is currently under negotiation for purchase by McCaffrey Interests, along with the USX Realty Division. They're going to build a multi-use purpose development within the South Works property. The community, fortunately, came together thanks to the Pilsons of the world, the Humboldt Parks, and Humboldt Park, Bronzeville, somewhat Rogers Park, and other developing communities, Lakeview, and said, no, we have watched you destroy communities and reinvent them, and we are not going to sit idly by and allow you to push us out of our community where we have long-term connections. And so we called a community meeting, and surprisingly to both us and the city of Chicago and U.S. Steel, 325 people attended this meeting. And it wasn't just South Chicago residents, it was the environmentalists from Hyde Park in the north side, people from Hammond, it was people from the entire city and south side region, because what happens in South Works will benefit or hurt the entire bi-state region. And the community said very clearly, we don't want a gated community. We want that to blend in with our community. We want to be here to benefit from all this redevelopment.
You know, we talk about the city and the country being a melting pot, and I think we oftentimes think about it in terms of people. But sometimes we forget that we are a melting pot here in this city and this country based on our physical elements, our physical environment. And today we're here to talk about some of the improvements we're making to our physical environment, and that's our wetlands. The wetlands play a crucial role down here in the 10th Ward. I think all of you are here know the diversity we have in the 10th Ward. The residential, the industrial, the commercial, and the natural wetlands. And there's a need, there's a desire to not only enhance, but create more wetlands to continue to further our beautiful environment here in the 10th Ward, throughout the entire city and throughout the Calumet region. And we've got some great news to announce today that will allow us to further improve our environment. And here to announce that is someone who is very familiar, very progressive, and making our city better, and that's our Mayor, Richard M. Daley.
Thank you very much, Alderman John Polk. I want to thank John for his leadership here in the 10th Ward, his commitment of working with community groups, block clubs, organizations that are vitally concerned about the quality of life in the community and the entire city. And so I think that's very, very important. Today, we are pleased to announce that O'Hare Modernization Program, all the way up there on the northwest side of the city, is providing more than $2 million to help create 15 acres of new wetlands at the Heron Pond or the Hyde Lake wetland. important part of the Calumet Open Space Reserve that will ultimately restore and preserve more than 3,900 acres of wetlands and natural lands here in the city. These wetlands improvements will begin the fall of 2008 after environmental testing. Determine the exact location will create a better wildlife habitat for the state endangered birds that currently use this area as well. In addition, public walkways and observation areas will be built for visitors and residents alike. By contributing towards the wetlands development in the Calumet region, the O'Hare Modernization Program continues to work towards its goal of leaving northeastern Illinois with more wetlands than it had before the O'Hare Modernization Program. Now that is unbelievable. This is part of an effort to ensure that the O'Hare Modernization respects the environment in every way possible. I personally want to thank Rosie, I want to thank Arnold and Susan, and all those that have been involved, as well as the community in this wonderful, wonderful project. Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming out to hear about the project. Obviously, lots of familiar faces in the room who've been coming to meetings about this and other projects in the Calumet region for, I don't know, 10 plus years. And I know this project, initially we started talking about it, I would guess about 9 years ago, just before I started at the department. And so I think last year we gave a little update on where the project was at. And really the biggest hurdle we had to jump was getting the approval of both Mayor Daley and the Public Building Commission of Chicago, the entity that will be doing the construction, to approve formally the project. And that occurred in May. Our last hurdle has been taken over, it has been completed, and we are beyond thrilled to be moving forward with the actual plans and specifications. So I just wanted to take a step back in time because some people have been saying to us, what is this building, what is it going to do, and why do we need it? And so why do we need an environmental center? One of the reasons is just simple demand. We have two facilities that we helped create in the city. One is the North Park Village Nature Center. Who's familiar with that site? Quite a few. It's on the northwest side of the city. It's about a 40-acre preserve, pretty small, tucked away in a development. It used to be a tuberculosis sanatorium where they dispensed drugs. And we converted it into a nature center. It's highly successful, as well as the Chicago Center for Green Technology. Probably even more of you are familiar with that building on the west side. And the difference between the two buildings is really that North Park Village Nature Center is primarily focused on showing people the different habitats of the Chicago region, so savanna, prairie, wetland, etc. And they do a lot of environmental education at that facility. And then the Chicago Center for Green Technology, their focus is more on green buildings and helping homeowners find green products to do their own type of green work in their home spaces, as well as for businesses and others. So what's really great about both of these facilities is we never really expected how much demand there would be for them. We didn't expect to need as many staff as we do. We never guessed how many tours we'd be doing. We just couldn't fathom. And each of the facilities probably have, I know North Park Village has more than 150,000 visitors a year in that little facility. And if you've been there for a special event, you can't even find parking. People are parking far, far away to come, and they just love it. There's 120 full-time volunteers dedicated to keeping the preserve in good shape. And Chicago Center for Green Technology has similar visitorship. Again, we didn't understand it was going to be as much of a museum as it is. So this demand really tells us that we could use more facilities. And if you all remember, years ago we had this report, I think it was in 1997, that explored all the potential areas where we could do this in Chicago. And Calumet, as I say here, it was obviously the logical choice. We've got nature, we've got industry, we've got communities. So we can expand this message about the environment to include the impact we've had on the environment, the rich history of the Calumet region and its steel mills, and all of the people who came from all over the world making this their home to find jobs and help move the community forward. I love these pictures here. They're Rod Sellers photos. There's one where the lakes have not been disturbed in the late 1800s. On the left, on the top is Wisconsin Steel at 106th and Torrance. And then on the bottom right is what was Illinois Steel at the time. And it's an employment office, and there's signs in 5 different languages telling people how they can initiate getting a job at the facility. So this is just such a rich area to explore that human connection with the environment. So it's a great place for the environmental center. And if anyone knows Carol Fieldkowski, that's her grandson. The theme, therefore, of building, which you've heard before, is going to be coexistent. It's not just going to be about nature. It's not just tree hugging. It's about industry. We want to talk about Acme Steel and their history in the area. We want to talk about Republic Steel, Wisconsin Steel. We also want to talk about landfills adjacent to the facility. We want to really talk about our connection with the environment, what we've done to it, and what we should be doing with it in the future to improve our impact. Okay. So this follows on the heels of the Calumet Area Land Use Plan, which the Planning Commission accepted in 2002, designating 3,900 acres of open space in the region in conjunction with 3,000 acres of industrial space. So Department of Planning and Development and others are focused on bringing those businesses back, greener businesses, better businesses with more jobs into the region. And we're working hand in hand with them to restore these open spaces because we don't want to keep this idea alive that these things are at odds with one another, that nature and industry have to be at odds. We want them to work together concurrently. And the open space, okay, so I won't go through too much of this because you all know it already. We have these wonderful wetlands, habitat for 40% of the state-listed species in the Calumet region. 11 sites are top Illinois sites for nature, tons of interpretive opportunities. You know that whole story. I think of this as urban restoration. It's kind of, we have sites where we have 70 acres, 10 feet deep of slag. How do you restore those? Well, we can't dig it up and haul it away. We'd be creating another Calumet somewhere else. So we're trying to constantly think creatively about how we can maybe take topsoil and blend it with biosolids or bring in peoria sediments to put them on top of the slag to create another growing medium where one didn't exist before. And that's kind of the message of Calumet. It's like we've effectively possibly make something wonderful out of it. Birds and the critters already know it's wonderful. We just need to improve it for people. Okay, you know the industrial history of the region. So we want to talk about a lot of these same things in the interpretation in the building. We want to talk about our history on the river and how water attracted so much development in the region and brought all the railroads through the Chicago region. We want to talk about all that history in the center itself. We also want to look square in the face of the landfills that are down here, a disproportionate share in the region, and talk about waste. I just had folks from the Green Corps program out here recently, and they honestly didn't know what a landfill was. We walked out there and we stood and talked about it, and they said, well, how do they get the garbage into the hill? The garbage is the hill. It was really a fascinating experience, and it just goes to show how much of an opportunity there is to educate people, because we're able to really look at our impact on the environment. And just real quick, I want to go through what's been happening on the site if you haven't been out there recently. This is where the building will go. You see the red star on the far southeast side of the site. We're closing, we hope, next month. Some more folks on our property. We're going through all the last hurdles right now, so we will be owning that shortly. In January, we kicked off our restoration work with the grant money from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, $750 grand. It was freezing that day, Jerry can attest to that. And we've been working steadily ever since then. Some of you may have popped up to the site and seen what's going on. There's lots of wildlife. There's 12 deer and 2 coyote. There's a red fox. We saw mink recently. It was crazy. There's so much wonderful wildlife out there to see. And you may have seen our, we call it the construction entrance along Torrance Avenue. And that's just really to keep the off-roaders off the site and just maintain our presence there. And we have vehicles constantly coming in and out for different purposes. And that will all come out at the end of the project, just heads up. We put our signs up, which it's interesting, since we put those up, we've had so many less people off-roading on the site, 18 people on the site. When we did the restoration, we had 140 piles of debris out of there, junk of all kinds, a lot of burned out cars, and mostly tires. I think it was 5 or 6 semi-loads of tires alone.
Wow.
Yeah, it's incredible. The woody invasive species that were on the site, there was buckthorn everywhere, all kinds of invasive species on the site, but there's tons of good species hanging out too. We helped cull a lot of the buckthorn especially. That was the predominant issue that we had on the site. And so these guys, this is the guys out there with their waste, I don't know, they call it trimmers that they cut down the buckthorn with. And then they herbicide each stump so it doesn't grow back. We reused all the mulch on site so that we could create our path system, because if you hiked out there, you know there's really nothing to hike on except you put on your rubber boots and you sink into bush holes. So we improved the path system. Let's see a picture of that in a moment. This is just a nice before and after. You can see how thick the woody layer is there. We look at after you can actually see through the site. We're getting the appropriate amount of light through the canopy cover, so the native species are already just thriving without even us doing anything, planting it. This is how the trails were. You can see on the upper left, there was nothing. We had to grade them a bunch of times because we had snow and rain in the middle of it. And they'll continue to do the maintenance on those trails through December of '08 using this grant money, and we'll take it around from there. There are all these vernal pools that we had on the site. We call them ATV vernal pools. The off-roaders just plowed through the site and left these big tracks, and the invertebrate specialist and the amphibian and reptile specialist said, you know, hang on, before you fill those in to make the trail, maybe you should preserve some of them, and they'll get great critters in them. So we thought, all right, we'll try that. And so we graded some of them and left some of them how they were. They're just teeming with life, especially tadpoles. And we hope to eventually get some more diverse species in there, like salamanders and that type of thing. But so far, so good. And Jerry was out there with some kids yesterday. They just love looking at them. And you can get the invertebrates out with a net and check out what's in there. And it's a really great learning opportunity. So we're excited. And the Chicago Public Schools have been asking to bring their kids out to do plantings. So we've planted 2 pools already. One with teachers and one with a whole bunch of folks who are out there in June. And then next spring, we'll plan a series of them with the public schools. Here's some of the tadpoles on the left, the little dark spots are all baby frogs coming out. Right. And then I always joke around, I'm excited that we're going to set the whole place on fire. And this fall, we know it's going to be between, I think it's November 1st to December 15th. And I know my grandma's going to be excited about that too. So it's part of just the prescribed burn process. It really discourages the growth of invasive species that can't handle fire, and the native plants thrive on it. So next spring we expect to just see an abundance of natives thriving. We also will be doing tree and shrub planting. This is a placeholder right now, November 5th and 6th. So keep those dates on your schedule if you're available during the day. 50 people from Ford are committed to coming to help plant trees. We're going to need to plant 250 of them. So if you want to help us plant, just let us, maybe we can note that on the sign-in sheet somehow. Just let us know and we'll keep you posted as to when and what have you. 5 different species are being planted, as well as 1 shrub species, the Nannyberry viburnum. We're also doing some research with the Forest Service using a C2000 grant. So we're going to study which species are most successful, and we're going to be trying this new kind of production method for trees called RPM, root production method. It's kind of like a tree on steroids. It helps them develop these really dense root systems, and so they grow so much faster and stabilize so much faster, and it's really nice for the native species that have a hard time being moved, like oaks. So we're going to try it out and see how they do. And then we're seeding 250 species all over the site from December to January. These are some of the invasives we've been removing. They're just now finishing with doing the herbiciding in the main marsh. So we'll be done with round 1. They're going to come back again this fall, setting up growth next spring. These are just some pictures from our fun event on June 2nd. If you haven't been out there to take a hike, you should check it out. This is us planting one of the vernal pools. And then this fall, it could be closer towards coming, we're putting in a water control structure at the site. And the star indicates where it will be, pretty close to the river's edge there. There's a swale, you can see in this picture. And the idea is that right now, the way the hydrology is at the site, surface water is here and the groundwater is here. And on many sites, there's lots of connections between them. Like, think of like holes, cracks in the ground to connect between them. At Hegrish Marsh, there's like one little spot, I think it's smaller than this table. So when things dry down, there may be groundwater, and if you get a lot of rain and things, sometimes if the groundwater recharges from other sources, it can't push back up because it's trying to go through this little pinhole, if you will. So we want to put a weir in, which will help it pump water from the groundwater in a dry year. In a drought, we can pump water back in. Like, we've had years where the state-listed birds are taking off mid-season because it's too dry, and conditions are too dry. We don't want that to happen. So we're going to be doing that. It's using supplemental environmental project funding, which you've heard about over the past few years. Chicago Specialties years ago had a violation and came to an agreement with us and the feds and the state to utilize the money for environmentally beneficial projects, and this is a really great project that will help us to manage the site. And I think this is one of my last slides here. Just mentioning other sites. Some of you were at the press conference this weekend. Heron Pond or Hyde Lake Wetlands are going to get $2 million for restoration from the O'Hara project. Mayor was down here announcing that, so that's really big news. Big Marsh we should be closing on in the next month or two. We're doing a site hike with them next week with Waste Management to just talk about them cleaning up some of the debris that's out there, which would be great as part of their closure. Indian Ridge Marsh, I know that they have some funding this year to revisit the plan. It's primarily to do the ecotoxicological assessment that they didn't do last time. That's happening, I think, next month. And then they did get some extra money to do a wetland delineation, which is really something they have to do before we can move forward on the site and really revise the plan. And I found out that next year they probably won't get any money, which is not great news, but at least it keeps us working for the next several months until we can get the next installment. And Van Disillusionment Prairie, which we used to be working on, as earnestly as this, is still a go. It's just that the costs, because of the contamination of the site, to do the restoration are so high that we need to narrow our scope a little bit. We may be focusing more just on the wetlands rather than the entire Senate site. We just don't know how we're going to deal with it just yet. Okay. The building, I forgot. Just a reminder, we had this design competition years ago, 108 entries, 7 different countries back in '04. And that's how Jeannie Gang and Mark Schindel and the team got selected through that design competition. We had a very reputable team on the jury and a wonderful advisor, and Donna Robertson of IIT. I would go through all these, but I think I'd rather give you the time on the floor. If anyone wants to take a peek at the other designs, these are some of them from way back when. But the whole thing culminated in Studio Gang being taken on board, so we're thrilled to have them. Thanks for coming down. It's been a while since we've talked about the Ford-Calumet Environmental Center. Claire Halpin is one of the architects on the team of Studio Gang architects helping to shape the plan for the building. And as you know, this has been a project that's been underway for many years, and we're getting closer to the finish line. It's important to note that I didn't know this before we started, because heck, I don't build buildings usually. That the first stage in the process is really just getting a conceptual plan for the building. And if you recall, the Ford-Calumet Environmental Center design competition that happened back in '04 was really what brought that conceptual design to the forefront in the competitive process. Studio Gang Architects won that competition out of 107 entries from all over the world. And since then, they've been taking that conceptual design and refining it and refining it and refining it. And even major things like there's been escalation in construction costs over the past several years, so we're just trying to keep an eye on the design at every stage. So we've moved from the conceptual phase to what's called SD, the schematic design phase, and that was completed in November, December of last year, somewhere around there. And what we just finished was called DD, design development phase, and that literally just finished in early March. And now we're going to be moving, we're in midway through what's called the construction documents phase. And at every step along the process, we get a check-in as to, okay, where are we getting our material from? How much is it going to cost? How green is it, right? Because we're trying to make the LEED Platinum, the greenest building possible, center here for everyone. And Claire's going to walk through kind of where we are in the design in a bit of detail. So, as I imagine many of us are non-architects in this room and non-engineers, if we have any questions for Claire, we can just ask in the middle for clarification. But if you have something larger, you may want to hold your question to the end. But suffice it to say that we expect about 100,000 visitors a year at the center, based on our current estimates. It's about 27,000 square feet with a 10,000 square foot porch, which we're really excited about. And you'll see that in the images. 2 classrooms. We have a laboratory for scientists who are conducting research about the region, and actually a bunk room for them to stay overnight to encourage those folks who may be coming from Champaign or other states, other places, to make it easier for them to do their research here in the Calumet region. We'll also have an auditorium that will seat maximum of about 230 people. In this arrangement of seating that we have right now, if we have tables and chairs around the tables, it'll be slightly less than that. But our expectation is that we'll have some pretty big events there, and it'll be a little bit of a community space to use for various purposes. We'll also have room for staff. We're expecting to have at least 4 full-time staff, at least to start at the center. And a really important piece is to have space for volunteers. Who's been to the North Park Village Nature Center? Okay, so you know what a great facility that is. And it's a crowded a crowded center, to say the least. And the volunteers, who I think there's over 100 regular volunteers out there, have a hard time, bringing in some snacks for when they're out working in the field. Do they have a cubby where they can put their things? It's very difficult. So we wanted to change that in this facility. So we'll be not only honoring them by having kind of a workspace they can deal with the phones and computers, but also have some cubby areas where they can put their belongings away and leave them in the office area while they go out and preserve and do their work or work with children, whatever they maybe they're doing that day. So we'll also have, I think it's about 5,000 square feet of exhibit space. You've heard about this before. We'll have a permanent exhibit area which will have pieces that are focused primarily on this theme of coexistence of nature, industry, and community, the theme we've been talking about for years. We're giving a lot more thought to what that space should look like with a group called Teller Matson. They do a lot of exhibit design throughout Chicago and greater region. So we're looking at some ideas right now about having a kind of life-size or just smaller than life-size slag car, pouring the slag into the wetlands with some kind of dramatic piece in there. It's conceptual at this stage. Pieces about wetlands, really highlighting the importance of the state-listed birds that are all throughout the region, and of course the huge role that the community has played historically and now and for the future. So lots more to come on that, and I think at our next meeting we may be delving into that in more detail, and I may be reaching out to some of you as well as we develop that plan. We're also going to have a little dining area in there. I'm trying to think what else I forget. Oh, Harris Loan boxes. These are boxes that are contained or that are managed by the Field Museum. Really all it is kind of a big box that teachers can check out on various topics. So some of them may be birds, some of them may be, what is biodiversity or what is a wetland, etc. The teachers can come and check them out and take them to their classrooms. So there's very few places in the region that house these boxes aside from the Field Museum, and we volunteer to work with them to be one of their primary spaces that teachers on the southeast side and even into the south suburbs will have a more accessible access point. We're going to have lots of storage. We want to be able to, for example, in the auditorium, take all the seats and chairs and put them in a room so we can, I don't know, have a big dance. I don't know what we'll do in here, but, right, have a big dance. And so there's lots of different unique spaces. And so Claire will probably make references to some of those spots, the classrooms, et cetera, as she goes through. So if you have questions about what those are, let me know. In the meantime, Claire Halpin, and does anybody here know Janet Halpin? It's her daughter.
Back to any Hegewisch questions. Let me go over and talk about the Environmental Center. So some folks know this, some folks don't. I'm only on this leg of this journey of the Environmental Center. This has been a long process. Of course, anything from the original gift from Ford Motor Company through the design competition, which was so great, got a lot of energy, through getting the state funding towards this project, and some other funding that DOE has been able to identify towards the project. As we went forward, so just so you know, city departments and actually many sister agencies, the Park District, the public schools and others work with our Public Building Commission to build buildings. So DOE itself doesn't build buildings. We work with an agency to build buildings. So we moved forward to take this concept that the Studio Gang architect firm had put together to full design documents. And we said, okay, here's our budget. And they went and did this full design process, and the budget ended up being way beyond what we had the capacity for at that time. But it was such a beautiful design, and even looking at this picture and these renderings here, we all probably agree this is such a lovely building, and so thoughtful for both the wildlife, the site, the industrial history, the community history here in the area, that we're like, okay, we got to make this work. We got to figure out a way to build this building. So I'd say we spent the last 2 or 3 years looking under every rock. The last rock that we have to look under is this process we've been going through with a company called Loop Capital Markets. And so different than sort of a traditional capital campaign, so like a museum would do a capital campaign where they go and ask a lot of people for money and they get these promises of money and then either they build it when they get to like 50% of that money or whatever. Loop Capital wanted to go a little different way. So we still have sort of the capital campaign in our pocket, but we want to build it as soon as possible, and we have such a large amount of money that we want to build something as soon as possible. So I'll get to that in a second. Loop Capital had proposed a model where they actually went to the kinds of corporations, and these could be large construction firms like a Walsh Construction. These could be the large systems firms, so like the folks who make all the technology that sort of manage, like this thing has just technology, you know, out every corner of it. So those folks who are making that technology, you want to showcase it in a facility like this. So large firms like General Electric, Johnson Controls, Siemens, these kinds of multinational, international firms. And also some smaller local firms where we could source local materials from. And Loop Capital went in and basically met with all of these firms at all kinds of levels, anything from their CEO to their philanthropy wings, to their sustainability wings, to their research and development wings, to say, you know, we want to showcase your technology in the facility. It's going to be this terrific, place, and really we created a lot of great materials. And, happy to kind of share those materials with you that kind of that tell the story of the building, the case study, if you will, for the building. And we got some very positive response, and we definitely have more money identified to build the building today than we did before we started, but we still, this isn't certain, and we're still working towards sort of finality. There's still a few more meetings. We probably have about another 5 or 6 weeks till the final decision is made, but we still, at least from where I sit, have a significant financial gap to building this beautiful design that we have today. So that's kind of a hard reality. It's been hard for us at DOE to admit to, because we have this beautiful building that we're so committed to and we've spent so many years, honestly, working towards. So what we're working to today is finishing out this process with Loop Capital, which, as I said, will probably be wrapped up in the next 5, 6, something like that weeks. And if we don't reach that target, we're going to look at the money we have, and we're going to downscale the design. So we're going to work with the architects. We're going to design something that has just as many, I think, of the sustainability systems, but is probably not a 30,000 square foot building with a 10,000 square foot porch. It may not have a 250 seat auditorium. It may not have 2 classrooms and all the storage for the Harris Loan equipment. And I don't know if you've seen any of the presentations on the designs, but it really was, a terrific bells and whistles design. So we're going to go back and we're going to evaluate the only thing I can promise you is that this time when a design comes out, it's going to come out with a budget that we actually have money in hand to build.
Okay, so mission, all recommendations for programming and operational strategies, the location for the best place for this to occur. I think all of you have talked to us. There's a couple key sites that we're looking at. They're identified on the map here. We'll talk about them at our table this evening. A couple of the key areas include Big Marsh, Van Blissenden, the Hegbush Marsh, and Indian Ridge Marsh. Those are the core areas that we're looking at. We've also heard some other kind of neat ideas that were out there. We're listening, bringing them in, talking about them, see if there's opportunity. This doesn't mean that this is the only initiative. There may be other ones that come out of this that we should think about. And we're paying close attention to the other issues that are out there, school closings and other elements that we should be thinking about relative to how we can use space effectively. So that's coming out of the process, and the building program. Building program and programming to us are two of the most fundamental building blocks of this process that need a little bit more time and effort. And that is okay. So tonight's goal is we've got maps of all these areas of the tables. We have specific questions. There's going to be a leader at every table. We're going to pick a leader, right? Yeah. So we're going to be the navigator of the discussion at the table in terms of the questions. Or we're going to ask for somebody from the table to be the omnibuser to record all of the notes along with us, and then we'll provide you what we're hearing, and we're going to deliver the information back to the room at the end of our breakout session. So we expect about 45 minutes or so for table discussion, and in the last 15 minutes or so, we'll have everybody, have our spokesman for the table get back to us and give us their table's thoughts. Does everybody...
State region. And the community said very clearly, we don't want a gated community. We want that to blend in with our community. We want to be here to benefit from all this redevelopment that's going to